Video game remakes and remasters are a trend in gaming growing larger than ever before now. Don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing that remakes of a game are inherently a bad thing, and on occasions I do see it as being necessary. To me, how necessary depends on what the original game was like, and a remake, in my eyes, is defined by basically being a different game while still containing most of the same core elements as the original game, so you can still tell that it's actually a remake and not just someone making some shit up using characters that were already made in the past. By the way, please subscribe and like the video for more cool content. I'm not even saying that the new remakes aren't good games. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. The reason why I'm making this video today is because I personally believe that the video game market now is being too oversaturated with video game remakes, and the biggest constructive criticism I have on this topic is that it feels like now in this day and age, nobody wants to have an original idea for once and actually be creative. Not just the video game industry, but I think in general with fictional works, movies, anime, and everything, I think also has this problem as well. But moving on. I never played the Dead Space remake yet, and I know that the Resident Evil 4 remake isn't even out yet, and I'm sure at the very least that they're pretty good games overall. And personally, since I haven't played them yet, I have no right yet to form an opinion on those games, constructively, as actual products themselves. But I can say at least for certainty that since literally 3 or more games this year that were anticipated for 2023's release schedule were literally just remakes of past games that were already made to begin with. That's a bit of a concern. I've actually played the original Resident Evil 4, and I actually thought it was an excellent game. Actually, it's one of my favorite games of all time. I'm sure the remake will be at least fine once it finally comes out, however, I can't help but feel like giving the game a remake was a little unnecessary in my eyes, because I thought Resident Evil 4 was the best game in the franchise, but I also thought that Resident Evil 2's remake was the best remake because it was it was more revolutionary and took RE2's design more and changed it, showing it was more necessary being a remake. Resident Evil 4 was so ahead of its time, though, that personally, I can't help but feel like the remake is just kind of extra and feels like it's just kind of there. Maybe I'm wrong because I haven't played the remake yet since it's not even out yet, and who knows, maybe when I actually get the time and chance to play it, maybe I might actually change my opinion, who knows. That's just me after giving first thoughts. I think while you always need to give a game or anything a chance before you constructively criticize it, it's always good as a critic to keep your expectations and thoughts fair, looking at both the positives and negatives of everything to keep a seasoned look on everything. And that's also why I'm making this video. I mean, literally later on in the same year, we're literally getting a Silent Hill 2 remake coming out. I mean, can't we get something actually new for once instead of just recycling the same crap over and over again? I mean, I'm not saying that these remake games are bad, and I'm not saying that literally nothing new is coming out either. I'm just simply saying all these remasters and remakes are taking up too much space in the market, and it's a concerning topic that I'm opening discussion on. But even with new games like The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, I'm a little bit skeptical towards it, because despite marketing itself as a game different than Breath of the Wild, it hasn't really shown much that's actually different by comparison, except for a few minor new things that you can do in the game. I'm not worried that the game won't be at least fun to play, but I'm hoping at the very least that they'll at least bother to improve the storytelling quality compared to the last couple games that came out. The reason why I bring up Zelda as well is because while it's still it still relates to the same point I'm trying to argue. I feel like originality making things has been dying for a long time. And even though remakes aren't necessarily a bad thing entirely, I do worry at some point that everything will just be the same thing over again in different clothing, and we'll just get tired of it. I am aware that Tears of the Kingdom is not a remake or a remaster, but the point with that is that it just kind of drives the point more forward that people are lacking originality. That's all I'm saying in regards to that. I mean, if there's one game that I actually hope gets a remake one day, I think Final Fantasy VI deserves it more than anything, because I've heard excellent things about that game, and that game actually looks archaic enough that it's probably time for an upgrade. I never played the original game, but it looks interesting enough for me to check it out one day, and hopefully it gets more treatment than it actually deserves. By the way, I also want to mention that, speaking of remasters, sometimes I understand the hype of them sometimes. I mean, there was actually one remastered game that I was excited for to come out this year, actually. It was the Tales of Symphonia remaster. And unfortunately, it is actually kind of disappointing that I hear on the internet that it's a disappointing version of the game. Now, I never played it on the Switch yet, but that's just what I've heard. So, unfortunately, I have no opinion regarding that. I can't really give my take on that. But it is unfortunate and sad. And it does kind of add to the whole entire, discussion that there are just too many remakes and remasters just being made nowadays to just throw at our face to make money. That being said, though, Resident Evil 4 was an entirely different animal than most games getting remakes. And the reason why I also bring this point up is because even when you look at other remakes of Resident Evil games, and all those other games that were inspired from Resident Evil 4's core game design with tank controls and movement and also its gunplay, Resident Evil 4 actually aged a lot stronger than most other games needing remakes. And it wasn't outdated enough that its remake was the most necessary priority in the world to redo the entire game and just give it a slight upgrade from start to finish. Like I said, I don't think that it looks like a bad game, but I can't help but think that, with too many remakes and remasters, there's just not enough, new ideas being thought of. And to prove that point, let me ask you this. The Last of Us Part 1 was a great game. I actually played the remaster of the game. I finished the game, and it had an amazing story about how Joel and Ellie ended up growing this excellent father and daughter kind of bond with one another. However, admittingly, the game isn't that old, and it didn't really need a remake. See my point? I know Resident Evil 4 is older than The Last of Us by 8 years, but in my eyes, it doesn't mean that Resident Evil 4 aged poorly. I think my point with that is the fact that when you look at The Last of Us Part 1's remake compared to the original game and even the remaster, the remake barely makes any changes with any of the game's core design. All you have to do or design in general. All you have to do as well is literally look at all the versions of the game, and you can tell there's not much really different between them. And going back to the age of Resident Evil 4, I think that it is definitely an older game than The Last of Us, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, when you really look at that game, I just think that it just hasn't aged poorly. But If you disagreed, let me know, but I'm just telling you how I feel. Now look, I said that I haven't played the remake of Resident Evil 4 yet, so maybe I am wrong, and for all I really know, there could be a ton of surprises where the remake really feels like an entirely different game than the original by design, while keeping it knowingly there as Resident Evil 4 with everything we know is still familiar. My problem is just that I think the video game industry and fiction in general, I think, honestly, not just video games, movies, anime, and everything in TV shows, are lacking creativity. And instead of creating anything actually new and something we haven't seen before, everyone is just recycling everything we've already seen a million times before and just giving it new clothes just to continue selling it and make money because all the companies are a bunch of greedy bastard crooks. That's just my point of view on making fictional works over what we got over the past several years. And after many things were disappointing and just not as good as they could have been, and not only that, but when you think about how disappointing some things have been over the years, it just gives you a bad taste in your mouth. And I just can't always help being just a little bit skeptical. I mean, yeah, you can't be too much of a snob either, and I get that. You don't want to be too negative, but I think being balanced, not too negative, not too positive, is the perfect way to be when you're having expectations for things coming out. You always want to be realistic. Sometimes, on a rare occasion, something might actually be a 10 out of 10 and blow you away. I think, there's a rare chance where something can actually be a 0, where there's almost or literally no redeeming qualities in something. Or it could just be a 5 out of 10 average game. Or anything, or any kind of rating. But it all comes down to looking at both the positives and the negatives and seasoning your review. Having creativity is important. I believe definitely that if there's one thing this world needs more of, it's definitely having more dreams and imagination. I just hope that at some point we can actually see some more new things that potentially can be classics and actually reach that potential without being just some remake because people don't have original ideas. But this is just my take. Let me know in the comments what you think down below. I like to always be open and hear what other people have to say about everything, and I always respect people's opinions. Thank you, everyone, and please subscribe and like the video for more content. I appreciate all the support I can get, and thank you very much.